I'm Kara, and welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. I believe that all of us possess unique gifts and talents that allow us to serve the world and our own growth in the highest possible way. Our lives are an expression of our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And here, we will explore businesses, thought leaders, and topics designed to inspire, helping propel your own growth so you can live your best and most purposeful life. Welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. Welcome back to the Soul Inspiring Business podcast. Today, it's a solo show. And really what kind of, inspired me to create this for you all is because I've been working with the team and realizing that some things that I think may be more obvious, they're not so much. So I thought this might be helpful for you because I think that learning skills for how to improve negotiations, whether that's what you do for work, for business. Of course, if you're an entrepreneur, I'm sure there's some elements. Of course, I work in real estate, so I negotiate all day long. But there are always elements of negotiation that in any career path and any business and even in life that these can help you. So we're going to be talking about 3 skills to improve any negotiation. And it'll be a quicker show, but if you have any questions, as always, please reach out to me. I love hearing from you. Probably I'd say the best way to reach me right now is on Instagram. And my handle is at Kara Chaffin Donofrio. And just reach out with a question. Would love to hear from you. And if you have a topic that you'd like to know more about, reach out, because that always helps me think through what's going to be most helpful to you, our listeners, so who I appreciate so much. Okay, so we're going to get started. So first things first, when I think about the best negotiations, the best outcomes, it's really about creating great outcomes. It's to some degree, I think the old paradigm was looking at a negotiation as a win-lose, but ideally, the best negotiation is where both parties maybe feel like they're giving a little bit too much, right? Or where you can kind of come to a successful conclusion where both parties feel happy about that outcome. And I think overall, and this might be for another show, but I do think we're shifting into a different paradigm of working, and that is focused on really leading from the heart and leading from a place of heart and making a difference and making an impact in the lives of others. And of course, negotiations are part of that as we negotiate our way through life. So probably more on that for another time, and this new paradigm that I think we're shifting into in business and how to show up in your business. But for right now, I'll stay focused into the task at hand, which is really talking about negotiation. So the first thing about, in order to be more skillful in negotiations, I think it's first to understand that actually your negotiation begins way before your ask, right? It's way before you're actually getting to what you want and how you're going to get there. So for example, in the real estate world, the negotiation actually begins in really finding out what it is that the other person needs or desires. What would make it a win for that other person, right? That helps you in negotiations. So really, this begins long before you get to whatever that ask is that you have. It's in the curiosity phase. It's in the phase where you're staying curious. You're asking lots of really good questions of what that other party is looking for. So to use real estate as an example, it's really important when we talk about, creating a successful outcome for our clients. And in our world, that might be getting the house, right? We want to understand, well, what's important to the other party? Is it timing? Is it price? Is it terms? There's so many different ways. When people ask me about a particular negotiation, I could name a million different ways that it plays out. So I think that sometimes when we think about scripts, um, negotiations are less about scripts, although it's really about staying in a place where you are intensely curious as to what is going to be a win for that other person. And from that place, then you can understand, well, how do I structure this? If I know that timing is the most important thing to that other person, then maybe I can make a bigger ask on the price because I know that the timing is more important. Right. And so what I find in most negotiations, especially when I'm, helping and teaching and training other people on the topic, is that most people only ask one question deep. So back in my sales training 20 years ago, we were taught what we called the need behind the need. And I think that's always really stayed very true um, to how I approach this curiosity phase. Because so many times I think we make assumptions based on one answer. So we ask a question, we get an answer, and then we wrap a whole lot of assumptions about what that answer meant versus going, well, one question deeper or two or three questions deeper to say, okay, so I hear what you're saying. This is important. What about that is important? Would ask kind of open-ended questions to get, again, to a closer understanding of what's really going on. Sometimes the person on the other side won't want to give you answers, right? And so what I find then is that just figure out different ways to phrase the question. So perhaps you table whatever you've asked, you go to something else, and then you come back to it, right? So that you're continuing to get deeper and deeper and deeper into the needs of the other. Because as you're looking at, how do we make something attractive to that other person where they're going to want to say yes? We have to structure in some wins, right? And so if we can give them some of what they want, keeping what we want as an important, as a big factor as well, it helps us understand how are we going to make our position. And I think that when we think about negotiations, it's really all about positioning. So the more information that you have, the more questions you ask, the more that you can stay in curiosity and close that gap, the better off you're going to be to create a really good position, a stronger position from the start. The other thing is, again, I think that we just make assumptions all day long. And so, back to my original point, just make sure that you're not making an assumption based on what somebody has said. Go deeper in the conversation. Ask another question. If they won't answer, table it, go to something else, come back to it. And the more you can do that in a way where it's friendly, it's conversational, you're keeping the conversation going, and maybe even add some humor. Oh, well, I know you may not want to tell me that. So, but what about this? And then figure out a different way to ask that same question that you were originally asking. So be persistent and really stay in curiosity even before you're getting to the place where you're going to have that negotiation, because that knowledge is going to give you a really good place to start in positioning your offer. Okay, so that's number one, stay in curiosity phase. And that one could take a while. And that one could take multiple phone calls. It could take a week, right? So you're just staying in this place. And I believe that alone, if you can do that more successfully, incorporate that more into when you are going into negotiation, you're going to be in a much better off place. But it really does start, before they even know that you're going into negotiation phase, right? It's the curiosity phase. So that's number one. That's a skill and it takes some time. And I'll actually share a quick story on that. So it was interesting. One of my team members just received an offer the other day, and it was actually kind of surprising because it came in, and it came in a little lower than what we thought. And, so she was kind of making some different assumptions on why that might be, and I said, listen, we can't make assumptions on why they've come in lower. Um, why don't you just go back and say to this other person, listen, this is actually kind of surprising because and this is, again, I'm using a real estate example. This home has just come on the market. So I'm actually kind of curious you, um, that you structured it this way. Can you give me some more insight into why that might be? Well, it turns out that they thought there was actually a repair when they had walked through the home. They thought that something needed to be repaired. Turns out it didn't need to be repaired. But the reason that their offer came in $7,000 lower was because they thought that they were going to actually have to fix something. So once she asked that question, it allowed the other party to say, oh, actually, well, this is why. Her to say, well, actually, that's really interesting you say that, but there actually isn't an issue with that. So knowing that and knowing that that's why they came in lower, are they willing to come back and give us a better offer? Well, they did. They came up by $7,000. And really, again, it was just by staying in curiosity mode, asking the question, saying, wow, this is really curious. Help me understand what's going on with this. So it's not approached in an adversarial way, but rather I'm really curious. This is interesting. Help me understand. And so I think when that becomes how you operate, you not that that's kind of the best scenario. Not all personality types are going to lead you into that place. But I think when you can stay open, when you can stay curious, when you can say, help me understand, this is really curious to me. I'm not really sure what's going on with this. Um, Give them an opportunity to explain, because had she and we just assumed that that was their best offer, not understanding the reason why, then potentially we would have countered the price and left money on the table. Instead, they actually came all the way up to full price just because of a misconception that we addressed, and then we're able to make it a win. So that's just how this plays out in action. And I think, again, when you can stay in curiosity and stay in a friendly operating way of help me understand, we want to get to the right place. Again, then those are kind of when win-wins can be created. All right. Number 2, I love this one. This is a skill in negotiation that is underrated, and it's really just called the pause. What do I mean by that? Well, the pause is really about being bold enough to ask for what you want. Maybe it's something that's a little like outlandish. Maybe you're asking for them to make a decision or someone to make a decision, and you know that you really haven't given them enough time, but you're just going to ask for it anyway, right? You're going to be bold. So then the key when you go into asking a bold question and asking for what you want is then being ready to wait, to literally close your lips, not talk until the other person fills in the gap. Because what may happen is you may catch them by surprise, or they may not be prepared for what you're going to ask. And so they'll just not say anything. And what happens is a lot of times we may feel, oh my gosh, that was a lot that I just asked. I can't believe I did that. And then you'll start to second guess yourself, and then you'll fill in the gap before and ruin your position, ruin the ask, ruin the strength and the boldness that you just had to ask for what you did, because you peel it back, right? Oh, and it'll be sort of like you ask the question, and then it'll be uncomfortable, and then you'll just jump in and say, well, we don't have to do that, or and and you've again just negated the fact that you were bold enough to ask that question. So the pause is extremely effective, and it's really when you want to get a reaction from the other side and what they're really thinking. So you go in with this bold question, bold enough to ask it. And what I would say is be bold enough to wait. Be bold enough to wait for them to reply. And they will if you wait long enough, because it does get uncomfortable. And what happens is often you'll get a pretty truthful answer from the other side, or maybe you won't get anything. But if you aren't bold enough to ask and you aren't bold enough to wait, then you're not going to get anything at all. So, uh, interesting. I had a situation where I was working with this agent, and we had submitted an offer with a deadline, and he said, well, I don't know that we could accept this because we haven't really been on the market that long. And I said, um well, have you had a chance to talk to your seller, and what if your client doesn't get better than this? What happens then? And there was a very long pause. In fact, I remember it very clearly because it was one of the longer pauses that I've waited. But I think we waited it might have been a minute, which, if you really think about what a minute is on a phone call, it's actually pretty long. So it may have been more like 30 seconds. It just felt like a minute. And then he finally responded and he said, okay, I'll talk to them. So, and we ended up actually getting the deal done. Now, was it the pause? Was it not? I don't know. But here's what I can tell you. It's a great, effective tool in negotiating when you want to be bold enough to ask a particular question. Maybe it's something you really want the answer to and you don't think they're going to tell you, and you just ask it anyway. And then you just wait, because they're not going to know how to respond. So they're going to be trying to think about how to respond. Then you wait, and then you'll get an answer that you can, use to help your positioning, or you don't, but you're never going to know unless you ask. And the key is just being willing to be bold enough to ask and then bold enough to wait. Okay, so that's number 2, the pause. Lastly, the third skill in negotiations is, I call it the squeaky wheel. But the key is to be the kindest possible squeaky wheel you could ever be. I love this because I have been able to create so many different, successful conclusions just by being extremely persistent. But there is a balance between being persistent and being annoying. So sometimes when you think you may be overstepping, I call it out even. I may say, listen, I know that I hope I'm not annoying you. I know that you've got things going on, but I really just am trying to, fight for my people, or I'm, really trying to, you give some reason. I know that you're bombarded, but I just know how much my clients really want this to happen, and I'd love to make it work for them. So the key with being the squeaky wheel is being persistent. Persistence pays off. And I see this, interestingly, so many times play out where it really is the person that communicates the most. So especially in a world where we have AI, we've got text and email, and it can be very impersonal. And so the idea and the skill of being the squeaky wheel with kindness, I would say, is to really just, not take no until it's over in a very kind way. I'll give you an example on just this playing out. So our clients had actually put together an offer on a property, and the we ended up not being the highest offer. The agent comes back. I've been really persistent, following up, texting, calling, because I think that sometimes we underestimate the voice to voice communication. You can get so much from that, so much more than a text. And so whenever possible, I love to have a phone call and understand, what does their voice sound like? Can I get a read on anything intuitively? Because as you know, I think that there's also intuition that plays into this. We can, read people and that helps us understand how to respond. But in this one instance, so it'd been extremely persistent. There was a negotiation that was actually happening. It's happening over 3 days, and there were multiple offers on a property. My clients really wanted it. And at the end of the day, the agent came back to me and said, Kara, I really appreciate you being really persistent, but my clients have decided to go with a different offer. And I said, oh, wow, that's really disappointing. I was really hoping that we could make it work. So how much over would they did they end up going? And she said, well, it was really just by $2,000. And I said, well, but what if my clients would be willing to do or actually, no, sorry. Then I got off the phone. I called my clients and I said, here's the deal. This is what she told me. And they said, well, we would pay that. We would pay $2,000 over. And so I called the agent back and I said, listen, I know that you said that it was over, but I just talked to my clients and they'd be willing to pay $2,000 more in order to make the home theirs. And she said, well, Kara, it's already done. I said, well, is everything signed? She said, no. I said, well, if it's not signed yet, here's what I would ask. If you could just do me this one favor, could you at least please call your client and see if that would make a difference? Because I know my clients really love this home and would really love to make it happen. So she said, Kara, I will. I'll at least call them, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I said, okay, that's all I ask. I just ask if you could just please promise me that one thing. So she did. And turns out the client actually did want to go with us because of that. And this, I think, has 2 lessons. Number one, being the persistent person of, there's a few things in there. It encompassed the first role, which we talked about, which staying curiosity, continuing to ask questions, understanding what it would take. It was then going back, using the pause, right, to say, well, what would happen if your client did this? And that was, the bold question, right? And then lastly, just being persistent, just not taking no for an answer until it was actually over. And at the end of the day, we were able to get the home for our client, and it was a huge win for everybody. But it really was a lesson, I think, that I've learned that over and over, a lesson in persistence. I had a similar situation happen where in another negotiation, a client of mine really wanted a particular home. There were 10 cash offers on the property. My client's was financed, actually. And they had actually ended up meeting the sellers somehow. And so there was a relationship there, and they really liked my clients, but they said, listen, like, everything about your offer is great, but we've got this cash offer that can close in 14 days. So when I got the call from the agent, he said, you know what, I'm so sorry, but it really just came down to the timing. Because I said, well, what was it? What was the thing in the end? Because I knew we were competing against cash. And he said it was really just timing. It was 14 days and they really want it done quickly. And I said, well, what if my clients could close in 14 days? And he said, well, can they? And I said, yes. And then, of course, I called the lender. I said, can you make this happen? Which she said, yes, she could. So it ended up being that I said, listen, if that's really, truly what it is, can you please just ask? Just ask them. So he did, and they ended up getting it. I mean, it was, again, they competed against a cash offer and won. And it came down to that same thing where it was just them and us. And it was staying curious enough to ask more questions and to understand if there was any way we could still be persistent and make the deal happen. So I'm giving you some of these examples. I know this is actually a little longer of an episode than I intended, but the reason being is because I think that um, we negotiate always in our lives, for whether it's on the personal side with things and negotiations that we're having in our personal life or in business. And it really is a skill, and a learned skill. And if you can incorporate these three things: staying in curiosity phase, staying really, open to questioning and asking questions even beyond what you think, so that you're not assuming anything, right? So staying in curiosity, learning how to use the pause, how to be really bold, and then be bold enough to wait for the answer. And then lastly, persistence. Persistence will always pay off. And there's a way to do it again where you're not being irritating, but you're being persistent with kindness. And I think there's a delicate balance there. But the more that you practice it, the more that you learn it, then I think that you'll notice your negotiations absolutely will improve. So I hope this was helpful. It went, like I said, a little longer than I anticipated, but thanks for listening, and would love to hear what you think. So wishing you lots of love, and we have got another great episode with a great guest for next week. So can't wait to share it with you. Until next time. Loved being here with you today, and would love to connect with you more over on Instagram. My handle is linked to the show notes, or you can just type in @Kara Chaffin Donofrio. And I have something special for you as a free gift: my dynamic life journal. This special book has the power to really help you live a soul-inspired life. Go to freegiftfromkara.com. Easy to remember, freegiftfromkara.com. Until next time, beautiful people, sending all my love.